I found the ballot stuffing evidence at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, my eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets for 6 straight hours, and knew immediately that Linda Carmichael and her cronies were going down. The numbers did not lie, even if the HOA board president did. Let me back up. My name is Derek Morrison, and I bought my house in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision in Scottsdale, Arizona, 3 years ago. Beautiful Spanish-style home, desert landscaping, mountain views, the whole package. What they did not mention in the sales brochure was that our homeowners association had transformed into a small dictatorship run by a woman who made Machiavelli look like a camp counselor. Linda Carmichael became HOA president 5 years before I moved in. She was 52, had that aggressive blonde bob haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and wore yoga pants like they were formal business attire. Her second-in-command was Patricia Hendricks, treasurer and professional busybody. Rounding out the board were Tom Schaefer, a retired accountant who basically did whatever Linda told him, and Deanne Foster, who I swear existed only to nod vigorously at everything Linda said. My first year in Meadowbrook Heights was relatively quiet. I followed the rules, kept my grass the approved shade of green, and did not paint my front door any unauthorized colors. But I started noticing things. Linda's landscaping company seemed to get every major contract. Patricia's son-in-law's construction firm handled all the community repairs. The board meeting minutes were always conveniently vague about financial details. Other homeowners complained, but quietly. Linda had a reputation for vindictiveness. Cross her, and suddenly you would get violation notices for having your trash cans visible from the street for 30 seconds or parking your car in your own driveway at a slightly wrong angle. She weaponized the CC and Articus like they were holy scripture. The first election happened 2 years ago in March 2024. I did not pay much attention then. Linda ran for re-election as president, along with her entire slate of candidates. A guy named Robert Chen tried to run against her, campaigning on financial transparency. He was a software engineer, quiet but determined. He went door to door, talking about requesting an independent audit and publishing detailed budgets. Robert lost by a landslide. Linda got 243 votes out of 310 cast. It seemed decisive, and Robert accepted defeat graciously. But a few neighbors mentioned to me that they voted for Robert and were surprised so few others had. I shrugged it off as people overestimating their candidate's popularity. 6 months later, in September 2024, Tom Schaefer announced his retirement from the board for health reasons. A special election was called to fill his seat. A woman named Jennifer Walsh ran on a transparency platform similar to Robert's. She was a teacher, well-liked in the neighborhood, organized a great Halloween block party every year. Linda's candidate was Marcus Webb, a real estate agent who had just moved to Meadowbrook Heights 6 months earlier. Nobody really knew him. He won with 198 votes to Jennifer's 87. Jennifer was stunned. She told me later that she had personally talked to at least 150 homeowners who promised to vote for her. That was when I started paying attention. The third election came in March 2025, the regular annual election. This time, 3 board seats were up. A slate of reform candidates emerged. Robert Chen trying again, Jennifer Walsh, and a retired attorney named Gordon Phillips. They called themselves the Transparency Slate and campaigned hard on financial accountability, open meetings, and ending the sweetheart contracts. I helped with their campaign. We knocked on doors, sent emails, held a candidate forum that Linda refused to attend. The energy was incredible. People were fed up. At neighborhood barbecues and pool parties, all anyone talked about was finally getting some oversight on the board. Election day was March 15, 2025. In our HOA, voting happened by mail-in ballot over a 2-week period, with ballots due by 5 p.m. on election day. An election committee of 3 volunteers counted the ballots that evening and announced results. Here is where it got interesting. Linda appointed the election committee herself. The 3 members were all her friends. Carol Benson, who had coffee with Linda every Thursday morning, Steve Garrett, whose wife worked for Linda's husband's law firm, and Michelle Torres, who had been publicly campaigning against the reform candidates. Gordon Phillips, the retired attorney, immediately objected. He cited the Arizona Nonprofit Corporation Act and our HOA's own bylaws, which stated that election committees should be impartial. Linda dismissed his concerns at the board meeting, saying these were trusted community members and implying that Gordon was being paranoid. The reform slate talked about getting a lawyer involved but decided to wait and see. Maybe we were being paranoid. Maybe Linda would not risk anything obviously illegal. The ballots went out in early March. Our HOA had 412 homes, so 412 potential voters. The ballots came back to a P.O. box that only Linda and Patricia had access to. The election committee met on March 15th in the community clubhouse. About 40 of us showed up to observe the counting. Linda tried to kick us out, saying only the committee could be present. Gordon Phillips pulled out a printed copy of Arizona Revised Statutes Section 33 to 1812, which guarantees homeowners the right to observe election processes. Linda relented but looked like she wanted to stab someone with a letter opener. The committee sat at a table, opening envelopes and sorting ballots into piles. From where we stood, 15 feet away behind a rope barrier Linda had set up, we could not see individual ballots. The process took 3 hours. They would not let us come closer or ask questions. At 8:45 p.m., Linda announced the results. Total ballots cast, 347. Linda's slate swept every position. Linda herself received 267 votes for president. Robert Chen got 80. For the 2 board positions, Linda's candidates got 251 and 248 votes. Jennifer Walsh got 79, Gordon Phillips got 68, and Robert Chen, running for both president and board, got 76 for the board seat. The room erupted. People shouted that the numbers were impossible. Jennifer stood up and said she had personally talked to over 200 homeowners who committed to voting for the reform slate. Gordon demanded a recount. Linda gavelled the meeting closed and said the results were certified. The election committee packed up all the ballots into 3 boxes and carried them out. When Gordon asked where the ballots were being stored, Linda said, in a secure location, and refused to elaborate. I went home furious but not sure what to do. I was a data analyst for a tech company, good with numbers and patterns. The next morning, I started digging into everything I could access. Our HOA website had historical election results posted going back 10 years. I downloaded every result and put them into a spreadsheet. Then I pulled property records from Maricopa County to see how many homes were occupied versus vacant or rental properties. I created surveys and went door to door, asking neighbors simple questions about whether they voted and who they voted for. What I found was damning. First, the turnout numbers were suspicious. In the elections before Linda became president, turnout averaged 42%. In Linda's first election in 2019, turnout jumped to 68%. It had stayed between 65 and 70% ever since. That was unusual but not impossible. Second, the vote distribution was too consistent. In normal elections, different candidates get different levels of support. Someone might win big in one neighborhood cluster, but do worse in another. Linda's vote totals came proportionally from all areas. Her support was mathematically uniform across the entire subdivision. That almost never happens organically. Third, I knocked on doors and talked to 178 homeowners over 3 weeks. I documented everything. Of those 178, 93 said they voted for the reform slate. 32 said they voted for Linda's slate. 53 said they did not vote or did not want to say. If my sample was representative, the reform slate should have won easily. Fourth, and this was the smoking gun, I got access to our HOA's membership roster through a public records request. Arizona law requires HOAs to provide membership lists to homeowners who request them. The roster listed every property address and the owner's name and mailing address. I compared the roster to the number of ballots cast. In the March 2025 election, Linda announced 347 ballots cast out of 412 homes. That was an 84% turnout, absurdly high for an HOA election. But when I cross-referenced the roster, I found something stunning. 47 properties were vacant or being renovated. 12 were owned by investors who lived out of state and had never responded to any HOA communication. 8 were in foreclosure proceedings. That was 67 properties that almost certainly did not vote. Even if every single other property voted, that would be 345 ballots maximum. And that assumed 100% turnout from occupied homes, which never happens. The math did not work unless someone was fabricating ballots. I documented everything in a detailed report. Spreadsheets, charts, door-to-door survey results, property records, statistical analysis. It took me 3 weeks of working every evening and weekend. The report was 73 pages. I shared it with Robert, Jennifer, and Gordon. Gordon read through it carefully and whistled. "This is solid work," he said. "Linda has been stuffing ballots." "Can we prove it?" Jennifer asked. "We need the physical ballots," Gordon said. "Those ballots are evidence. If we can examine them, we can find the fakes. Different handwriting, patterns in the signatures, ballots from vacant properties." "Linda said they are in a secure location," I said. "She will not let us near them." "Then we need a court order," Gordon said. Gordon knew a good attorney who specialized in HOA law. Her name was Rachel Kimura, and she had a reputation for taking on corrupt boards. We met with her in April 2025 at her office in downtown Scottsdale. Rachel listened to our story and reviewed my report. "This is excellent work," she said. "You have established a pattern that suggests fraud. But you are right, we need the actual ballots to prove it in court." "Can you get a court order?" Gordon asked. "I can file a lawsuit challenging the election results under Arizona's nonprofit corporation statutes," Rachel said. "We can request the court to impound the ballots and appoint an independent examiner, but it will be expensive and time-consuming. Are you prepared for that?" We discussed it. Robert, Jennifer, Gordon, and I agreed to split the legal costs. We also started a GoFundMe to cover expenses, which raised $8,000 from fed-up neighbors in just 2 weeks. Rachel filed the lawsuit on April 22, 2025, in Maricopa County Superior Court. The case was Morrison et al. v. Meadowbrook Heights HOA et al. We were the plaintiffs, along with 23 other homeowners who joined the suit. The defendants were Linda, Patricia, Tom, Diane, and the HOA itself. The lawsuit alleged that the HOA board had conducted fraudulent elections in March 2024, September 2024, and March 2025. We requested that the court invalidate the most recent election results, order a new election under independent supervision, and compel the HOA to produce all ballots and election materials for examination. Linda went ballistic. At the next HOA board meeting, she called us malcontents and troublemakers trying to undermine the community. She claimed the lawsuit was frivolous and that the HOA would vigorously defend itself. What she did not mention was that defending the lawsuit would cost HOA funds, meaning all the homeowners, including us, were paying for her defense. Rachel pointed out this conflict of interest in our filings. The legal process moved slowly. Linda's attorney, a bulldog named Richard Grayson, filed motions to dismiss the case. He argued that HOA elections were internal matters and courts should not interfere. Rachel countered with case law showing that Arizona courts had jurisdiction over HOA election disputes when fraud was alleged. In June 2025, we had our first major hearing. Judge Patricia Caldwell presided. She was in her early 60s, with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. Both sides presented arguments. Richard argued that we had not met the burden of proof for fraud. "Your Honor, the plaintiffs have presented speculation and circumstantial evidence," he said. "They have not shown actual fraud." The election was conducted according to HOA bylaws, votes were counted, and results were certified. The plaintiffs are simply unhappy they lost. Rachel stood up. "Your Honor, the plaintiffs have presented a detailed statistical analysis showing mathematical impossibilities in the vote totals. We have documented testimony from homeowners indicating widespread irregularities. Most importantly, the defendants have refused to produce the actual ballots for examination. If the election was legitimate, why not let an independent party verify it?" Judge Caldwell leaned forward. "Counselor Grayson, where are the ballots from these elections?" Richard shifted. "The ballots are in the HOA's possession, Your Honor, stored securely." "Can they be produced for inspection?" the judge asked. "The HOA objects to producing the ballots on privacy grounds," Richard said. "Homeowners voted with the expectation of confidentiality." Rachel jumped in. "Your Honor, ballots can be examined without revealing individual votes. An independent examiner can verify signatures, check for duplicate ballots, and confirm that ballots came from actual homeowners. This is standard procedure in election disputes." Judge Caldwell thought for a moment. "I am inclined to agree with the plaintiffs. Mr. Grayson, your clients will produce all ballots and election materials from the March 2024, September 2024, and March 2025 elections within 30 days. The court will appoint an independent forensic examiner to review the materials. Both parties will split the examiner's costs initially, with final cost allocation to be determined based on the findings." Richard started to object, but the judge held up her hand. "This is my ruling. The defendants have 2 weeks to file any additional objections in writing, but absent a compelling reason, the order stands." We walked out of the courthouse elated. "She gets it," Jennifer said. "The judge sees through Linda's nonsense." "Do not celebrate yet," Gordon cautioned. "Linda will try something, she always does." Gordon was right. 2 weeks later, Richard filed a motion claiming the ballots had been accidentally destroyed. According to his filing, the ballots had been stored in a shed at the community center, and a pipe had burst, flooding the storage area. All 3 elections' worth of ballots were supposedly water-damaged beyond recovery and had been thrown away. Rachel was livid. "This is destruction of evidence," she said when she called to tell us. "And the timing is incredibly suspicious." "Can they get away with that?" I asked. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Rachel said. She filed an emergency motion arguing that the convenient destruction of evidence immediately after a court order should result in sanctions against the defendants. She requested an adverse inference instruction, meaning the court should assume the ballots would have shown fraud. The hearing on that motion was intense. Judge Caldwell did not hide her skepticism. "Mr. Grayson, you are telling me that ballots from 3 separate elections, which your clients knew were subject to pending litigation, were all destroyed in a plumbing accident?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor, it was an unfortunate coincidence," Richard said. "Where is this shed located?" "At the Meadowbrook Heights Community Center." I assume your clients have documentation of this flood, photos, plumber's reports, insurance claims. Richard hesitated. The HOA is gathering that documentation, Your Honor. You do not have it today. Not with me, Your Honor. Judge Caldwell made a note. You will produce all documentation related to this alleged flood within 1 week. Photos, repair bills, insurance correspondence, everything. And I want the names of any vendors who did the cleanup or repairs. We waited anxiously for the HOA to produce the documentation. When it finally arrived, it was laughably bad. There were 3 photos of a wet floor in a storage room, no photos of damaged ballot boxes or ballots themselves. A handwritten invoice from someone named Jake's Cleanup Service for $500. No insurance claim because Linda claimed the damage was below their deductible. Rachel tore it apart in her response filing. She pointed out that the community center had security cameras, yet no footage was provided. No HOA board meeting minutes documented the flood or the decision to destroy the ballots. The cleanup invoice had no business license number, and when Rachel's investigator tried to contact Jake's Cleanup Service, the phone number was disconnected. Your Honor, this is a transparent fabrication, Rachel argued at the next hearing in August. The defendants destroyed evidence to avoid judicial scrutiny. This warrants severe sanctions. Judge Caldwell agreed. In a written order issued on August 18, 2025, she ruled that the HOA had engaged in spoliation of evidence. As a sanction, the court would presume that the destroyed ballots would have shown fraud. Additionally, the court ordered the defendants to pay our attorneys' fees incurred in fighting the destruction of evidence motion, about $14,000. Linda was furious. At the next HOA meeting, she ranted for 20 minutes about judicial overreach and activist judges. Several homeowners walked out in disgust, but we still had a problem. Without the physical ballots, we could not definitively prove fraud. We had strong circumstantial evidence and a favorable court ruling, but Linda's lawyers continued to fight. That was when I remembered something. Our HOA had switched to electronic ballot tracking 2 years ago. When you mailed in your ballot, you could check online to confirm the HOA had received it. The system was supposed to improve transparency. I went back through my documentation. The HOA's election website had a ballot tracker feature. During the March 2025 election, I had logged in to confirm my ballot was received. The system just showed ballot received without details, but it required entering your property address and a unique PIN that came with your ballot. What if the system kept logs? I called Rachel and explained my idea. She smiled. I could hear it over the phone. That is brilliant, she said. We can subpoena the HOA's election system records. She filed a subpoena to the company that hosted the HOA's website and ballot tracking system. The company was called HOA Solutions, based in Phoenix. After some legal wrangling, HOA Solutions produced the server logs. The logs were a gold mine. They showed every time someone accessed the ballot tracker, including IP addresses and timestamps. More importantly, they showed when ballots were marked as received in the system. I spent a weekend analyzing the logs. What I found made my hands shake. According to the logs, 142 ballots were marked as received in the system during a 90-minute window on the evening of March 15, 2025, between 6:30 and 8 p.m. All 142 entries came from the same IP address. That IP address belonged to Linda Carmichael's home network. I confirmed it through a cross-reference with publicly available information. This was it. Someone at Linda's house had logged into the system and mass-entered ballot receipt confirmations. They were creating fake ballots electronically, but it got better. I cross-referenced the 142 fake ballots with the property addresses. 31 were from vacant properties, 18 were from foreclosed homes. 23 were from out-of-state investors who had not participated in HOA matters in years. The rest were from properties where I had personally talked to the homeowners, who told me they did not vote. I created a detailed report showing the data. Rachel filed it with the court as supplemental evidence. This was no longer circumstantial. This was direct proof of fraud. Richard tried to explain it away. He claimed that Linda was just helping the election committee by entering ballot information into the system. But that made no sense. Why would one person enter 142 ballots in 90 minutes from her home, rather than the election committee entering them as ballots were opened at the clubhouse? Judge Caldwell scheduled a hearing for September 15, 2025. This time, she ordered Linda Carmichael to appear personally and testify. The courtroom was packed. At least 50 homeowners from Meadowbrook Heights showed up to watch. Linda arrived in a navy pantsuit, her hair freshly styled, projecting confidence, but I could see the tension in her jaw. Rachel questioned her under oath. "Mrs. Carmichael, did you access the HOA's ballot tracking system on the evening of March 15, 2025? "I do not recall specifically," Linda said. "Let me refresh your recollection." Rachel handed her a printed copy of the server logs. "These records show 142 ballot entries made from your home IP address between 6:30 and 8 p.m. "Do you see that?" Linda glanced at the paper. "I may have been helping update the system." "Helping who?" "The election committee." "Where was the election committee?" "At the clubhouse." "Why were you not at the clubhouse?" "I had other responsibilities." "So the election committee was counting ballots at the clubhouse, and you were at home entering ballot data into the system?" "Yes. How did you know which ballots to enter?" "They called me with the information." "Who called you?" "Carol, Steve, and Michelle, the committee members." "All three of them called you?" "One or more of them, I do not remember exactly." Rachel pulled out another document. "Mrs. Carmichael, we have subpoenaed phone records. Your cell phone shows no incoming calls from Carol Benson, Steve Garrett, or Michelle Torres between 6 and 8 p.m. on March 15th. How do you explain that?" Linda's face flushed. "Maybe they used a different phone." "Which phone?" "I do not know. This is ridiculous," Judge Caldwell interrupted. "Mrs. Carmichael, please answer the questions directly," Rachel continued. "Mrs. Carmichael, of the 142 ballots you entered into the system that evening, 31 were from vacant properties. 18 were from foreclosed homes." "How did vacant homes and foreclosed properties vote?" Linda sputtered. "I do not know the status of every property." "But you entered their ballots into the system." "I entered the information the committee gave me." "The committee told you that vacant homes and foreclosed properties sent in ballots." "I did not verify every address." Rachel pulled out another document. "Mrs. Carmichael, I have here testimony from 16 homeowners whose addresses appear in the 142 ballots you entered. Every single one of them states under oath that they did not vote in the March election. How do you explain that?" "People forget," Linda said weakly. "Or they are lying because you convinced them to." 16 different homeowners all lying. "I do not know." Rachel paused. "Mrs. Carmichael, did you fabricate ballots in the March 2025 election?" "No." "Did you fabricate ballots in the September 2024 election?" "No." "Did you fabricate ballots in the March 2024 election?" "No, this whole thing is a witch hunt." Rachel turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I believe the evidence speaks for itself." Judge Caldwell agreed. On October 1, 2025, she issued a comprehensive ruling. The court found that Linda Carmichael and the HOA board had engaged in systematic election fraud across 3 elections. The March 2025, September 2024, and March 2024 election results were invalidated. The court ordered a new election for all board positions. to be conducted under independent supervision. Most importantly, Judge Caldwell appointed an independent monitor to oversee the new election and all HOA elections for the next 3 years. The monitor was a retired judge named Harold Brennan, with full authority to ensure fair election procedures. The ruling also ordered Linda, Patricia, and the other board members to step down immediately. An interim board of 3 neutral homeowners was appointed to manage HOA affairs until the new election. Linda tried to appeal, but the Arizona Court of Appeals denied her petition. The Superior Court's ruling stood. The new election was scheduled for November 15, 2025. Judge Brennan took his role seriously. He hired an independent election company to handle ballot printing, distribution, and counting. Every ballot had security features like watermarks and unique serial numbers. Voters could submit ballots by mail or drop them in a secure box at the clubhouse, which was monitored by cameras. Judge Brennan held 3 town halls to explain the process and answer questions. He was patient and thorough, making sure everyone understood how the election would work. The reform slate, Robert Chen, Jennifer Walsh, and Gordon Phillips, ran again. Linda tried to assemble a new slate of supporters, but nobody wanted to associate with her after the court ruling. 2 other homeowners ran as independents. The campaign was refreshingly clean. There were candidate forums, email newsletters, and door-to-door conversations. No dirty tricks, no intimidation. On Election Day, I volunteered as an observer. The counting happened in the clubhouse with full transparency. Judge Brennan presided, and he allowed anyone who wanted to watch. About 30 homeowners showed up. The ballots were counted meticulously. Each ballot was opened, verified against the voter list, and sorted. Judge Brennan provided running totals throughout the process. At 7:30 p.m., Judge Brennan announced the results. Total valid ballots, 189 out of 412 homes, a 46% turnout, typical for HOA elections. Robert Chen won the presidency with 147 votes. Jennifer Walsh and Gordon Phillips won the 2 board seats with 142 and 139 votes respectively. The room erupted in cheers. People hugged and cried. It felt like democracy had been restored. Robert gave a short speech thanking everyone and promising transparency and accountability. "This community deserves honest leadership," he said. "We will earn your trust every single day." The new board took over in December 2025. Their first act was to hire an independent auditor to review the HOA's finances. The audit took 2 months and revealed disturbing findings. Linda's landscaping company had been overcharging the HOA by about 30% compared to market rates. Over 5 years, that meant roughly $85,000 in excess payments. Patricia's son-in-law's construction firm had similar markups, totaling about $63,000 in overcharges. The audit also found that Linda had approved several questionable expenses, including a $15,000 consultant fee to a company that did not seem to exist, and $7,000 in community event expenses, with no supporting documentation. The new board held a community meeting in January 2026 to present the audit findings. Robert explained that the board was considering legal action to recover the misappropriated funds. "This is not just about money," Robert said. "This is about accountability. The previous board abused their positions and violated the trust of this community." Gordon, now serving as the board's legal advisor, explained that they would be filing a civil lawsuit against Linda, Patricia, and the vendors who participated in the overbilling schemes. "We will also be referring potential criminal charges to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office," he said. That got people's attention. Criminal charges meant this could be serious. The board hired Rachel Kimura to handle the civil case. She filed suit in February 2026 against Linda Carmichael, Patricia Hendricks, Carmichael Landscaping LLC, and Torres Construction, Patricia's son-in-law's company. The lawsuit alleged breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and unjust enrichment. Simultaneously, Gordon prepared a detailed complaint to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office outlining potential criminal violations. The election fraud could constitute forgery and fraud. The financial schemes might be theft or embezzlement. On March 8, 2026, 2 detectives from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office showed up at Linda's house. Neighbors called me immediately. I drove over and watched from across the street as Linda was led out in handcuffs. Patricia was arrested the same day. Both were booked on charges of fraud and forgery related to the election rigging. The county attorney's office announced that the investigation was ongoing and additional charges might follow. Linda's arrest made local news. The Arizona Republic ran a story. Scottsdale HOA president arrested for election fraud. The story detailed our lawsuit, the court findings, and the arrests. It quoted Rachel saying, "This case demonstrates that HOA boards are not above the law. Homeowners have rights, and those who abuse positions of trust will face consequences." The story resonated. I started getting calls from homeowners in other HOAs across Arizona, asking for advice on how to investigate their own boards. I created a guide based on my experience and shared it online. It went viral in HOA reform circles. Linda and Patricia's criminal cases moved forward through spring 2026. Both pleaded not guilty initially and hired expensive defense attorneys. But the evidence was overwhelming. In May, Patricia accepted a plea deal: 1 count of fraud, 3 years probation, a $10,000 fine, and restitution to the HOA. Linda held out longer, but in June her attorney advised her to take a deal. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of fraud and 1 count of forgery. Her sentence? 18 months in jail, eligible for early release after 9 months, 5 years probation, a $25,000 fine, and restitution of $78,000 to the HOA. At her sentencing hearing on June 22, 2026, Judge Caldwell addressed Linda directly. "Mrs. Carmichael, you held a position of trust in your community. Homeowners relied on you to manage their association fairly and honestly. Instead, you rigged elections, lined your pockets, and betrayed that trust. Your actions undermine the democratic process and hurt your neighbors. This sentence reflects the seriousness of your crimes." Linda stood silently, her face pale. Gone was the aggressive, confrontational woman who had terrorized our neighborhood. She looked small and defeated. The civil lawsuit settled in July. Linda and Patricia agreed to pay the HOA a combined $148,000 in restitution for the overbilling and questionable expenses. Carmichael Landscaping and Torres Construction also paid settlements and agreed to never do business with any HOA in Maricopa County again. With the settlement money and recovered funds, the HOA's finances stabilized. The new board used some of the money to upgrade community amenities, fixing the pool heater that had been broken for 2 years and repainting the clubhouse. Judge Brennan's oversight continued through 2026. The annual election in March 2026 went smoothly with no issues. He certified the results, and 2 new reform-minded candidates joined the board. In his final report, Judge Brennan wrote, "Meadowbrook Heights HOA has successfully transitioned to fair and transparent governance. The community should be proud of the homeowners who stood up for their rights. Life in Meadowbrook Heights improved dramatically. The new board published detailed monthly financial reports online. Board meetings were recorded and posted for homeowners who could not attend. The vindictive enforcement of petty rules stopped. People felt heard and respected. I stayed involved, joining the HOA's finance committee as a volunteer. Robert asked me to help develop better procedures for elections and financial oversight. We implemented changes that would make it nearly impossible for another Linda to hijack the board. In August 2026, Jennifer organized a community barbecue at the clubhouse. It felt like a celebration, even though nobody said it explicitly. Families came out, kids played in the pool, and neighbors who had been at odds during the Linda years reconnected. Gordon stood with me by the grill, flipping burgers. "You know, Derek, none of this would have happened without your work," he said. "Those spreadsheets and data analysis cracked the case." "We all did it together," I said. "You provided the legal expertise. Jennifer and Robert had the courage to keep running despite the harassment. Rachel fought hard in court." "True," Gordon said. "But you had the tenacity to dig through the numbers at 2 in the morning. That matters." I thought about that night, staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned, finding the pattern that did not make sense. It had been exhausting and frustrating, but worth it. Robert joined us carrying a platter of hot dog buns. "Speech time," he joked. "No speeches," Jennifer called from across the patio. "We are done with speeches. Let's just enjoy the evening." So we did. The sun set over the desert mountains, painting the sky orange and purple. Kids splashed in the pool. Someone started playing music. It felt like a real community again, not a dictatorship. A few weeks later, I got a call from a reporter at a Phoenix TV station. They were doing a story on HOA reform and had heard about our case. Would I be willing to be interviewed? I agreed. The segment aired in September 2026, part of a larger investigation into HOA abuses across Arizona. My interview focused on the importance of transparency and homeowner vigilance. "HOA boards have significant power over your home and your money," I said on camera. "Pay attention to what they are doing, ask questions, request financial records. If something does not look right, investigate. You have rights and you should use them." The segment led to legislative attention. 2 state representatives introduced a bill to strengthen HOA election oversight in Arizona. The bill required independent election administration for any HOA over 200 homes and created penalties for election fraud. It passed in early 2027 and became known informally as the Meadowbrook Heights Law. Linda served 9 months in jail and was released in March 2027. She moved out of Meadowbrook Heights immediately, selling her house at a loss. I heard she left Arizona entirely, relocating to Nevada. I did not keep track of her after that. She was no longer my problem. Patricia also moved away after completing her probation. The other former board members, Tom and Deanne, stayed in the neighborhood but kept low profiles. Tom apologized to me once at the mailbox, saying he had been weak and should have stood up to Linda. I accepted his apology. Holding grudges helps nobody. By mid-2027, Meadowbrook Heights had become a model HOA. Other communities reached out to learn from our experience. Robert and Jennifer gave presentations at Arizona HOA conferences, sharing our story and lessons learned. I scaled back my HOA involvement after the first year. I had spent so much time fighting corruption that I needed to focus on my regular job and personal life again. But I stayed on the finance committee and remained friends with Robert, Jennifer, and Gordon. The incident taught me important lessons about civic engagement and power. HOAs seem like minor, almost trivial organizations. Who cares about neighborhood associations and mailbox regulations? But they control real resources and affect real lives. When power is concentrated and unchecked, abuse follows. It does not matter if it is a national government or a neighborhood HOA, the principles are the same. People often ask me if it was worth it, the time, the stress, the legal bills, the conflict. Absolutely. We exposed fraud, held criminals accountable, and restored honest governance. We protected our homes and our investments. We proved that ordinary people can challenge corruption and win. The most satisfying moment came in April 2027, 1 year after the new board took over. I was sitting on my back patio enjoying the evening weather when Jennifer called. "Derek, you need to check your mailbox," she said, sounding excited. "Why?" "Just go check." I walked out front and opened the mailbox. Inside was an envelope from the HOA. I opened it and found a check for $1,500, along with a letter from Robert. The letter explained that after settling all the litigation and paying expenses, the HOA had a surplus of funds recovered from Linda and Patricia. Rather than just putting it in reserves, the board voted to distribute a portion back to homeowners as a special assessment refund. Every homeowner received $1,500. "Consider this a dividend on your investment in good governance," Robert's letter concluded. "Thank you for standing with us during the fight. Your community is stronger because of you." I stood there holding the check, shaking my head in disbelief. We had not done this for money. We had done it because it was right, but getting something back felt validating. I texted back to Jennifer, "This is amazing, thank you." "Thank the whole community," she replied. "This was everyone's victory." She was right. It took a community to defeat Linda's corruption. One person could not have done it alone. It required data analysis, legal expertise, courage, persistence, financial resources, and collective action. Each person played a role. Looking back now, almost 2 years after I found that election fraud evidence at 2 in the morning, I feel proud of what we accomplished. We took on a corrupt board, exposed systematic fraud, endured personal attacks and legal battles, and ultimately won. The courts appointed an independent monitor. The criminals went to jail. Democracy was restored. Meadowbrook Heights is now a pleasant place to live, with responsible leadership and genuine community spirit. The Reform Board's term limits ensure that power does not concentrate again. The financial controls prevent self-dealing. The election procedures guarantee fairness. Most importantly, homeowners learned that they have power. They learned that asking questions is not rude, demanding transparency is not paranoid, and fighting corruption is not hopeless. Those lessons will protect Meadowbrook Heights for years to come. Sometimes I think about Linda sitting in jail, wondering if she had any regrets. Did she think the money was worth it? Did she believe she would never get caught? Did she convince herself that rigging elections and overcharging the HOA was somehow justified? I will never know. People rationalize their behavior in complex ways. Maybe Linda saw herself as indispensable and thought she deserved extra compensation. Maybe she believed the ends justified the means. Maybe she was just greedy and arrogant. What matters is that she was stopped. The system worked eventually. It took effort and resources, but justice prevailed. The experience changed me. I used to think HOAs were boring administrative necessities. Now I understand they are small democracies that require the same vigilance as larger governments. I used to avoid conflict and confrontation. Now I know that sometimes fighting is necessary and right. I also learned practical skills. I became proficient in Arizona HOA law, which is useful knowledge. I learned how to conduct effective investigations and present evidence. I learned how civil litigation works. All valuable experience that I never expected to gain from a neighborhood dispute. In June 2027, the Meadowbrook Heights Board held elections again, the second annual election under the reform system. The process was smooth and professional. Turnout was a respectable 48%. Robert ran for re-election and won easily. Jennifer decided to step down to focus on her teaching career, and a new candidate joined the board. At the annual meeting after the election, Robert gave his president's report. He talked about the HOA's strong financial position, the successful completion of several improvement projects, and the positive community atmosphere. 2 years ago, this community was broken, Robert said. A corrupt board had rigged elections and stolen money. Neighbors did not trust each other or their leadership. Today, we are healed. We have honest governance, transparent finances, and genuine community. That transformation happened because people like Derek Morrison, Jennifer Walsh, Gordon Phillips, and many others refused to accept corruption. They fought back. They proved that integrity matters. I am honored to serve this community, and I promise to continue earning your trust every day. People applauded. I sat in the back of the room feeling emotional. We had come so far. After the meeting, a new homeowner approached me. She had just bought a house in Meadowbrook Heights and heard about our history. I chose this neighborhood partly because of your story, she said. I wanted to live somewhere with good governance and engaged residents. Thank you for making this community what it is. That meant more to me than anything. We had not just fixed problems, we had built something better. We had created a community that people wanted to join because they knew it was well-run and fair. As I write this in late 2027, life continues peacefully in Meadowbrook Heights. The HOA functions smoothly under honest leadership. The annual elections are fair and transparent. The finances are sound and published online for anyone to review. The rules are enforced consistently and reasonably. Linda Carmichael is a distant memory, a cautionary tale we tell new homeowners about the importance of oversight. Patricia Hendricks is forgotten. The corruption they represented has been rooted out and replaced with accountability. The independent monitor requirement ended after 3 years of clean elections, just as Judge Caldwell ordered. Judge Brennan attended our final annual meeting under his oversight in March 2028, certified the results one last time, and congratulated the community on its successful transformation. You have built strong institutions here, he told us. Maintain them, stay vigilant. Democracy requires constant attention. His words resonated. Democracy does require constant attention, whether at the national level or the HOA level. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance, as someone once said. That applies to homeowner associations just as much as to governments. I still live in Meadowbrook Heights. I still serve on the Finance Committee. I still check the HOA's financial reports every month, looking for anything unusual. Old habits die hard, and honestly, I do not want them to die. That vigilance is what keeps communities honest. People sometimes ask if I would do it all again, knowing how much time and energy it would consume. Without hesitation, yes. Fighting corruption and restoring honest governance was one of the most meaningful things I have ever done. It made a real difference in real people's lives. The story of how we proved the HOA board rigged 3 elections in a row, and how the court appointed an independent monitor, is now part of Meadowbrook Heights lore. New homeowners hear about it. Kids growing up here will learn about it. It is our community's story of resilience and justice. And somewhere, in some other HOA in some other state, a homeowner is probably sitting at their computer late at night, looking at election numbers that do not add up, wondering if they should investigate. I hope they do. I hope they find this story and realize that fighting back is possible. I hope they know that ordinary people can challenge corruption and win. Because that is the real lesson of Meadowbrook Heights. We were not special or extraordinary. We were regular homeowners who got fed up and decided to act. We used available tools, public records requests, legal procedures, data analysis, collective action. We worked within the system, and the system ultimately delivered justice. It took time. It took money, it took courage and persistence, but it worked, and that gives me hope, not just for HOAs, but for democracy generally. The tools of accountability exist. The legal structures are in place. What is required is people willing to use them, willing to stand up and say, "This is wrong, and I am going to do something about it." That is what we did in Meadowbrook Heights. That is what defeated Linda Carmichael and her corrupt board. That is what led to arrests, convictions, restitution, and reform. And that is what any community can do if they find themselves facing corruption and abuse of power. The system works if you work the system. Justice is possible if you fight for it. 2 years after finding that evidence at 2 in the morning, sitting here in my home in Meadowbrook Heights, I can say with confidence, it was worth every sleepless night, every dollar spent, every stressful moment. We proved the HOA board rigged 3 elections in a row. The court appointed an independent monitor, democracy was restored, justice prevailed. And that makes all the difference.